For me, just to see this little trickle of water in this small kind of spring place, and then to imagine that that became a huge river was really somehow inspiring. This is really an important topic, thinking about disaster risk reduction, climate change, urbanization, all these things that really water is related to. And despite the fact that things are very difficult for many people in Africa, in these countries, they still have this joie de vivre. You should do what you love and not do what you think you should do. And in the end, things will work out and you will be happy.
That is Darcy Molnar, Senior Program Manager at the Leopold-Bachmann Foundation and the Masters in Advanced Studies in Water Resources Program Coordinator at ETH Zurich. Growing up in West Africa, Darcy forged a career around creating opportunities for global education around the critical challenges that our world is facing, including water security, climate change, disaster risk reduction, and how nature-based solutions can help overcome these. She is also founder of the 500 Women Scientists Zurich chapter, which seeks to provide more visibility to women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. My name is Peter Marcus Bach, and this is the Grand Challenges Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways. We reflect on the many out-of-the-box ways our guests have navigated the complexity and intricacies of the environment at the cutting edges of science, engineering, technology, and design. On today's show, Darcy and I revisit how she developed her passion for water, from the rivers of West Africa to boating along the Nile in Egypt. We reflect on what it takes to teach the complex topic of nature-based solutions, explore her activities in creating global North and South knowledge exchange networks, and how she has encouraged and created a path forward for better gender balance in STEM at the tertiary education level. Detailed information is provided in the show notes over at peterambach.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Darcy.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm really glad that we've managed to schedule this and to be sitting here in this very cool cubicle, soundproof. They're very cool for meetings and also for podcast recording.
Exactly, yeah. This Institute of Environmental Engineering at ETH.
Thank you, ETH, for this room.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation with you today because you've been very passionate about education, and we ourselves have gone into trying to teach a whole range of students about nature-based solutions and blue-green infrastructures. But we'll get into that, especially why we chose to use both terms. But I guess one thing that really is curious to me is you've spent quite some time in Cairo. I've always wanted to visit Egypt because the country just looks fascinating, let alone not only the pyramids, but just the landscape itself. What's it like living in Cairo?
Well, for me, that was quite some time ago. So I think that Cairo's probably changed a lot since then. But when I was a junior in university, so my third year in university, I wanted to go abroad. And I decided to go to the American University in Cairo. And yeah, it was really very interesting. I just went for one semester. It was fun. Lots of nice people I met and very eye-opening to live, really in the middle of Cairo. I was walking to the university. And then I decided after studying there for a semester, actually I was in a physics program, I decided to return when I graduated from university because I wanted to also spend more time there and try to work there actually because I thought it'd be really interesting to work in Cairo in Egypt. And I ended up working in a computer lab in an American school, which was interesting in itself. So I stayed there for a year, and I think, the most kind of life-changing thing that happened for me there was that I met someone who was working for an engineer who was working for CH2M Hill and working on sanitation infrastructure in Cairo. And I learned from him about all the challenges, all the work, how do you set up a system for such a huge city, so many people. And then I also saw when it rained there, how the water just flowed everywhere. There was either no rain or suddenly there was too much rain. And so, between my discussions with this American engineer and seeing the challenges people face there with respect to water, then I decided, I want to go into engineering. I want to try to figure out how to help solve these challenges. And I felt that this engineering with a focus on water was perfect for me because I like nature, I liked water, and it was actually solutions-oriented. So then after these experiences, I went to Colorado State University and I did a civil engineering degree with a focus on water resources.
And what better place than Cairo? Because when I've looked at some of the historical aspects of water management, the Nile has been one of these most complex river basins because there's so many cities along there, and it's yet a very, very fertile land. Back in the past, I think there was a lot of activities along the shores of the Nile, and this has required a lot of water management and smarter water management nowadays because, we're facing all these challenges with climate change as well as rapid urbanization along these rivers. So it must have been a very interesting journey then, seeing it firsthand from a place with such rich history in water management.
For sure. And, the Nile goes right through Cairo, so it's really a big part of life there. It's, we would go on falukas, which are these boats on the river in the evening just to hang out and have a drink, and it was beautiful. But then you travel away from the Nile and it's desert, right? So really those civilizations have learned to live with having this wonderful body of water going through them, but then far away in the desert, it's difficult to grow things and there's a lack of water. So, it was really an interesting place for me to somehow have my eyes opened also to the challenges regarding water resources challenges and, of course, urban growth and cities, which then later relates to nature-based solutions, which we'll talk about. But definitely, how can we manage with the water resources we have and with the growing populations we have and with, climate change and so on. So it was a good place to start my journey on the water topic.
Definitely. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, what would be your top 3 travel tips for Cairo and Egypt in general? You mentioned the boats. That's a really nice
faluka.
one.
Yeah, to go down the Nile, to experience that, take a boat along the Nile. The Red Sea is also fascinating. I went down there. That's also fascinating. We went on a camel trip into the desert. Fascinating, just to also see how people survive in these dry regions and the richness of the cultures as well. Really fascinating. So, as I said, things have changed now. So I would say better just to, talk to someone who's been there more recently. But again, the Nile's still there and, taking a cruise down the Nile and visiting all these historical, cultural wonders that they have to share is fascinating. Yeah. I just spoke to someone who was there recently and he was also just, again, so amazed and had a wonderful experience.
So I guess make sure you have a contrasted trip. Desert, water, the Nile, as well as all the culture as well to soak up, historical and current.
Exactly. I wouldn't spend too much time in Cairo. It's a very big,
and busy
crazy,
city.
busy city. So if you want to maximize your time and your experiences, travel south. Yeah.
Definitely. And so you've sort of hinted out water, that's where your passion is now, water and development in particular. But you also mentioned that you got a bachelor in physics. How did we go from, other than Cairo itself being a big moment, but how did we go from a bachelor in physics all the way to where you are now, which is water and development?
Yeah, that's a good question. As a young student in primary school, I always loved maths. I enjoyed that the most. I started my education in an African school in Cameroon, the one foreign white person in a class of 100 students. And it was really an African experience there in Cameroon in a local school. And so, maths always interested me. The teachers were really good, and math was a big, was coming from this French tradition, and so the focus on math was high at the primary level. And then in high school, I was in Yaoundé, Cameroon, and I went to a French high school that was run by the French, and I had an excellent physics teacher who, just made it fun, really made physics fun. And so when I went on, to have to choose courses in high school, I always picked physics because I just enjoyed it. But then when I went to university, so I was at a high school in Nigeria at the time. It was a boarding school for my senior year. I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I think all young people at age 16 or 18, like here in Switzerland, they have to make a decision. I didn't really know. My dad was a linguist. My mom was a creative writer. So they couldn't advise me on math or physics too much. And I knew that I wanted to work in Africa again. I wanted to return to Africa. I wanted to do something good, like give back somehow. My parents lived a life of service in Africa, so I wanted to do something similar. So I thought, international relations, that would be the thing to study, and languages. So actually I went to Middlebury College in Vermont that has a strong language program where I also studied French and Spanish and German and Russian while I was there because I like languages. Not to a full, I can't say I'm fluent in those languages.
I was going to say, we should have some nice sentences from these languages.
No, but I loved languages. So maybe that was from my father. I loved the languages. And then I thought international relations, that would be a way to get into diplomacy. And so that's how I started my studies at Middlebury in Vermont. But then after the first semester of taking a politics course, I realized that that wasn't for me. I just really did not enjoy studying politics. And I thought, there's no way I can go through 4 years of this. And I had, for fun, signed up for a physics course because...
For fun?
For fun. I thought,
Okay.
well, that I know I'll enjoy that. I signed up for a math course because I knew those I would enjoy. And then I signed up for the ones that I had to take for this international relations course. So then I was suddenly stuck thinking, oh my goodness, now what? I've started on this path to international relations. I don't like it. I don't see myself continuing in this way. And then I had those credits already in physics and math. And I thought, okay, you know what? Let me just do physics. And I don't know what kind of job I can get with a physics degree, but it's something I like. And so I changed to physics, and then I was able to create my own minor in development. At the time, it was kind of like in development, and so I could take some economics courses, and I could also then go to Cairo and take some courses there that could be counted for my minor.
So the more, I guess, numerical route or the more quantitative route into development rather than the political one, which you didn't really like as much.
Exactly, but, I knew that with a physics degree, I wasn't sure, I just followed my heart, and I didn't know how with a physics degree I could actually end up getting hired, like for an NGO or for the embassy, I said, okay, I'm just going to do this. So I had my semester abroad in Cairo. I couldn't stay longer because of the requirements. I had to cram everything in to finish on time. But yeah, in the end, it worked out well. And I guess that's one of my messages is that, you should do what you love and not do what you think you should do, right? And in the end, things will work out and you will be happy. I'm very happy how things worked out, and it was not a straight line by any means, and I could never have imagined myself sitting here today with you in Zurich, but I did what I wanted. And then that's where, when I went to Cairo, going back to that story, of course, when I went to Cairo, then I realized also how I could actually get skills that could make me employable was in engineering. And there was actually a connection between the Colorado State University and Egypt. They were doing research there. So that was also a reason to go there.
I'm sitting across from you and I'm smiling as you're telling me this because on the one hand, it is so refreshing to hear a very different side of this rather big irony that I've seen on so many episodes of the podcast. You're good at math, so you should go into engineering. And countless guests have thought that. But it's nice to see that you took a different route where you went into physics first. And you tried to stray away from that, to go into international relations and politics, but that you ended up following your passion. But it's good to see that it wasn't directly engineering compared to every other story I've heard so far, including myself.
Yeah.
So,
I have to say, to be honest, I didn't know that something such as engineering existed because I didn't have guidance in university. Yeah. There wasn't, the advisors there at this boarding school in Nigeria didn't really know. And of course, yes, at that time, I was also really focused on languages and on development studies. Right? Yeah. So that's, But I think for me also, when I was in university, then at Colorado State University, it's been really good for me to have the science physics bachelor's and then go into the engineering. Yeah. Because I think sometimes, sadly, engineers kind of think, oh, we're different from the scientists, but we need to work together. Yeah. So this is what I've been trying to do. I try to bring students from UCIS, for example, into the courses that I offer here, our nature-based solutions course, because I think there needs to be a dialogue between us. And I think it's helped me as a professional to have this basis as a scientist and then move to engineering.
Yeah. So you mentioned UCIS, so it's the environmental science faculty of the ETH, and bringing them into the more engineering side of things as well. I think it's very important to have that foundational knowledge and making sure you take, your physics, chemistry, biology, depending on what you're doing, you take these courses to understand that fundamental knowledge before you start applying it. Because engineering is often a very applied thing, but if we don't look at things from first principles, which is a strong belief I have, then we're not going to be able to explain it, to understand it, to interpret it, to defend our results in the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Cairo, big change for you in terms of shifting into that more engineering side and also into the environmental side. But I guess there's one other keyword that you mentioned to me once, or place, in fact, that then really shifted you into water as well, or that nurtured your passion for water, and that is the Sanaga River. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so the Sanaga River in Cameroon is a very big river at the mouth of Cameroon, but it starts way up in central Cameroon where I grew up. And so, yes, as one of the very few excursions we did, or the only one, if I remember correctly, because it was a local school, we didn't have resources to go on excursions. But my father helped. He drove a bunch of us in our Land Rover to the source of the Sanaga River. And I think, there was one other car. I mean, everyone was piled in and we went. And they showed us, and the teacher explained to us that this was the source of this big, huge river that, kind of defines Cameroon as well. It's a great resource in Cameroon. So for me, just to see this little trickle of water in this small kind of spring place that we visited, that we had to walk to through the bush. And then to imagine that became a huge river was really somehow inspiring. And I think it stayed with me. And so I've always loved water. My mom said I always enjoyed water, swimming and so on. And I think then this led to kind of this connection with nature, the desire to kind of preserve nature, to recognize that, we need to also take care of these resources. So that...
And the curiosity to see the interconnectedness of nature as well, starting from that little spring to the big river, and then what's connected to all of that as well, and what it provides for, and, how we use it, swimming in it, or how animals live off the river, and cities, in fact, spring along the riverbanks.
And also the concept that, it comes out so pure. And what are we doing to it then, as a society? And I think that's part of also what's driven me a bit in my teaching, sustainable water resources. Let's try to preserve our natural resources. Let's try not to leave too much of a human mark with plastic bottles and pollution and so on. So I've always had a strong sense that we've been given this gift, this resource, and we need to care for it as well. And so raising our understanding of where does the water come from, also, I think that also then ties in, we'll get to it, but the nature-based solutions that we try to then preserve the source water so that the cities down below can, spend less money on cleaning water and so on. So, but it's also this interconnectedness between the communities who live up there and the source of these rivers and then what's happening downstream.
No, indeed. And so that's, in a way, one of your big legacies here at ETH, which is the Masters in Advanced Studies course in Water Resources Management. And with that focus on sustainable water resources management, nature-based solutions, and a whole lot of other activities that you also do in West Africa. So you did your bachelor's and PhD in the US, and you had that time in Cairo, but you're now in Switzerland. What's that journey to get from where you were to now being here in Switzerland?
Yeah, so I think, often we meet someone and that's what happened. So I met my future husband when I was studying. He's from Slovakia. And so he was also doing a PhD. So after finishing in Colorado, we went to Slovakia for a year and I worked with a postdoc grant at a university there, kind of following up on my research, which had been on rainfall runoff modeling. So we went there. We were there for a year. And then my husband got an offer here at ETH as a postdoc. In 2001, we moved here, so many years ago. But we came here for the postdoc. Then at that time, we had a little daughter, and I decided to take some time off and be with the family because family's very important to me. I come from a family of 4 kids, and so that was always very important, and I also wanted a family. And so I stayed home, and we have 3 kids. I stayed home for 5 years with them, and my husband ended up getting a permanent position at ETH, and so I also got a Mariheim Vögling grant, which is from the Swiss Science Foundation, for women to get back into academia after taking breaks.
Lovely.
So in 2005, then I started back at ETH as a research scientist, or doing research with the grant from Mariheim Vögling. And then when that grant ended, then we were able to develop with Professor Burlando here at the Institute of Environmental Engineering this program. It's a Master of Advanced Studies in Sustainable Water Resources. So we built that, we designed it kind of together, and it's a 1-year program that's meant to get especially international students here to ETH to study sustainability and water resources. So I've been coordinating that program since 2009 when it was was offered.
Oh, wow. That's a decent amount of time. And I guess the serendipitous aspect of being in Switzerland is that Switzerland has a lot of these programs that allow you to then set up collaborations with the Global South, and that they support that a lot as well financially and logistically.
Yeah, so I mean, for many years, I was really focused just on this program because I was also then responsible for some courses, but it's a 66 credit program, so the students also take classes, regular environmental engineering courses, and I was supervising research as well, and we encouraged them to do theses on topics related to their home countries. So we really wanted them to try to understand what are their challenges in their home countries. More recently, it's been how climate change is going to impact their resources, and then use tools that they learn here. So that kept me busy for many years. But then at some point, I really wanted to get back to the development kind of side and somehow connect more closely with Africa rather than just bringing the students here. We had a lot of Ethiopian students, especially. I have still this year. But then fortunately, I was able to be part of this call from Swiss universities. That's the SUDAC. That was a call to support collaborations between the Global South and Switzerland, academic institutions. Yeah. And that's where I became involved in this Network for Water and Life in West Africa.
Several key big programs that you coordinated, led, founded as well. And I guess it's a good opportunity to get into each and every one of them. 3 in particular that I think are close to your heart as well. Maybe we'll start with the one that we have both been involved in, which is nature-based solutions and blue-green infrastructures. Close to my heart. For listeners who have listened to previous episodes, I would always begin this topic by asking what your favorite term is, but let's just skip that because I think that's going to be part of the discussion. Probably the more interesting question to touch on is how do you teach this kind of course? And I guess you have your own reflections from teaching this course for 2 years, as do I. But maybe let's start with how this all started. Like, what spurred on this idea to come to me and to collaborate together on this course?
Yeah, so as part of the MAS program, I have a course. It's called Water Resources Seminars. So I invite 10 different experts who are actually practicing experts. So the idea is, the students here learn so much theory at ETH, at ETH, and it was the idea to bring practitioners into the classroom. And so we cover many different topics, also water and agriculture and water and business. But I always, every year, invited someone from IUCN, which is International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And this has been, since 2009, right? And more recently, then more and more, the topic of nature-based solutions has been coming into their presentations. And, some years ago, I realized, this is really an important topic, thinking about disaster risk reduction, because that's also been an area I've been really interested in because it relates to floods and livelihoods. But thinking about disaster risk reduction, climate change, urbanization, all these things that really water is related to.
And often key to as well.
And key to, exactly. And so I thought, the students, I think it would be really good to have a course that really focuses just on nature-based solutions because there's so many different aspects. And to try to cover it just in 1 3-hour seminar, one day in the year, I thought, no, we have to expand on this. And that's, then so I got more familiar also with, nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction. And then, that's how then, I don't even remember how we first started talking about it, but I thought, you have the blue-green infrastructure expertise more with the urban areas. And for me, I've always been interested in the rivers, in the, larger landscapes, the sources of the rivers and so on. And so then we thought, well, that would be a great combination, nature-based solutions from my side and blue-green infrastructure from your side.
And that, listeners, is how we distinguished between the two terms. Many will argue about that distinction, but hey, we had to find the two most common and current buzzwords and use that as a sense of marketing. But in a way, it makes sense too, because in the urban spaces, that term hasn't been as prominent because when you think of nature-based solutions, you're looking at the much larger swaths of land restoration, which can then manage disaster risk, manage water security, actually combat climate change as well. Whereas in the urban setting, you're looking at a lot more engineered solutions or, green space planning solutions that will also contribute. But I think we needed that distinction to begin with. so that I guess on the one hand, we can also distinguish the spatial scales at which we are, talking about the topic.
Exactly. And the expertise, that each of us brought into this course. So it was really nice to co-design it with you because, my part just kind of started as setting the scene and explaining the terminology that's now very current. Some years ago, it was not nature-based solutions and the IUCN definition, and there are a couple other definitions, but nature conservancy, all they're doing. So it's a lot more visible, kind of, I think, in media now, and people are aware of this. So I kind of laid the background about this whole, the transition that has been, to actually recognizing nature-based solutions as a solution, an engine, a way to solve the challenges. Whereas you had, a lot of expertise also working with architects in urban areas that you could bring into the course that was very valuable for the students also.
The changing of that more complex concrete jungle to a less concrete jungle, I guess, if you want to call it that. But you had that connection with the IUCN. You could come in from not just, the water side, but also the broader conservation and environmental aspects as well. So that was ideal for setting the scene. And, as we speak now, the UN has officially adopted a definition for nature-based solutions. And for those interested, we'll put a link in the show notes. To mention also the recent EU nature restoration law, I think, got passed. So that's going to be exciting to try and restore 20% of Europe's land and seas as well. And this is where these kinds of systems and solutions will play a huge role in the future, and not just in an urban area, but broader scale.
And I think in Switzerland also some years ago already money's been put to kind of renaturalizing our rivers, right? There's Definitely. A lot going on in that, realizing that, hey, what we did was not the best way to approach water resources management, just canalizing. And so I think that this also, for me, the reason also to teach this course was to show the students what professional opportunities they could also consider, because I think there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of fixing what's been done wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think, for environmental engineering students, I think it's an excellent opportunity going forward.
No, totally agree. And so our approach to the course, we had to fill something like 14 weeks of teaching, a lecture for 2 hours every week. And so we had to subdivide it in some form whatsoever. And so you approached it quite nicely. You picked 4 key dimensions to touch upon: the ecosystem services that these nature-based solutions can provide, disaster risk reduction, water security, and climate change. How did you limit your curriculum to those 4 key topics? I'm sure there's so many other aspects, like biodiversity, for example. What was going through your head thinking about limiting it to that?
Yeah, I wanted to make it, I think, also very obvious and real for the students who are really studying water resources, right? So their knowledge is really focusing around water resources management. And then the, climate change, of course, our students also look at climate change, how weather patterns may change, and know about flooding issues. And so I picked topics that, were really tangible, I felt, with this clear connection to water. And so, as I said again, too, like making them recognize the opportunities for work and where they could also contribute. And so if they had been biologists, I would have focused maybe more on the biology side. But my students from the Master of Advanced Studies are coming from environmental engineering, civil engineering backgrounds. So it was really trying to connect it to the water and make it real, like to be able to have real examples then.
True.
And that they could see or identify with, rather than just some kind of concepts, but they wouldn't be able to grasp it as well.
Yeah, and I guess same coming from my end when I designed my part of the course, which revolved around cities, looking at how we characterize different cities. And I took integrated water management as, in a way, the red thread through all the different topics, because a lot of nature-based solutions in cities or blue-green infrastructures, and I myself am confusing myself with the terms now, we're using them interchangeably. But with a lot of these technologies, a lot of the knowledge around them and the engineering around them emerged from the water space. Okay, we talk about heat nowadays, and that's just as much a part of it. But I adopted that integrated urban water management framework to actually guide the order of topics, but also the content, because water plays that significant role. as we've said so many times throughout this conversation today.
And it's accessible to everyone too, I think. I mean, everyone understands, everyone knows water is life and uses water on a daily basis and recognizes how important it is to have unpolluted water, to have enough water. So I think it was a good way to make it relevant to the students. And I had such good feedback from the students. One told me that was the best course she's taken it during her ETH years.
And I'm so proud to hear that.
Exactly.
We've had such great students during the course from a whole range of diverse backgrounds as well. And I guess what really allowed us to see their skills and unique talents shine was the one big assignment we gave them, which was a design project. I mean, you gave me a lot of leadership in choosing that, but what were your thoughts? Were you nervous at times when I was like, okay, let's try and pick something in Switzerland, or let's pick this random site for them to design?
No, I mean, for me, my philosophy also in learning is that it's really in doing that we learn. I mean, how many lists and so on did we memorize throughout our whole years of learning that
remember that. Yeah.
We don't remember so much. But as soon as you have something that you really, an example that you're working on yourself as a team, trying to figure things out, you are, solving something and producing a solution and really thinking about a real life problem, that is such a valuable way to learn. So I thought, when you suggested this, I said, that's perfect. I don't want them to just sit in class and be listening to lectures for 14 weeks. I want them to actually be exposed to a real issue, a real challenge. They could even visit the place if they really wanted to. The case study that in the 2 years you had 2 different case studies, but they could have visited if they'd wanted to. They could, really think about the people living there. How would their solutions affect the people living there? So to me, I think that's part of what made the course such a good course for the students and such a good learning experience, because they actually tried to solve or came up with their solutions, but then they could see what other teams were doing, and that was also a learning process, right? Because they could think about, this is how we approached it, but wow, they did this a different way. That could also have been interesting, so they learned from each other. And I think, that to me was an excellent addition to the course. I would not do it any differently. I think that this case study was an integral part of it.
No, definitely. So if you and I had to give advice to any listener who's thinking of doing a course in nature-based solutions, what would be your, 3 pieces of advice?
Well, the first is read.
Oh, yeah.
Go online and find out. There's so much going on now. And so there's so many pilot case studies. So much in Europe, if you want to focus on Europe, international sponge cities in China. So I would just say, learn as much as you can about where we are now. Because so much has happened in the last few years, So find out about that. And then, then you have to think about your audience. What are your students like? Who are they and what background are they coming from? And maybe what is their reason for taking the course? Because like you said, if they're biologists, then you can focus so much on the plant types and other aspects, how, like in a city, right? How to set up, how to pick the right species and so on. But if they're environmental engineers who have knowledge of hydraulics and so on, then you can focus on that. So the first, read. The second, think about your audiences and how you can tailor it really to your audience. And then the third would be, find a case study that they can work on. And as part of our case study, I guess we also took the students to the field, right?
Yeah.
We did one afternoon where we went through Zurich and we visited different places, and you explained the blue-green infrastructure examples. And I think that was also an excellent way. So this field excursion, visit places, and then the case study is a way then to really make it much more real for the students. And, just as a side note, this excursion we did, I think the students too, their eyes were opened up to the fact that actually there are nature-based solutions all over the city.
You just have to notice it to be able to recognize it.
Exactly. And normal people don't realize that. But then now suddenly something was lifted off of their eyes, and then now they can see blue-green infrastructure everywhere, or green roofs and so on, and understand that there's a purpose for these, right?
Definitely. And I'm so glad we align on this, because in a way, my 3 takeaways are very similar. On the one hand, you need to make it global, current, and there's just so much happening. So you need to be able to also teach the students where they can find that information. What are the key organizations to look for? What are the key publications or reports or case studies to look out for coming in the near future? Because so much is happening so quickly. So giving the students the chance to get the resources themselves, I think that's the first very important thing. Then there was the creativity side. You have to make it creative because there's no one size fits all, as many other guests would also agree with. And nurturing these creative skills to think outside the box, to draw inspiration from outside, from examples in the field, but even first being able to recognize that this is a nature-based solution, green infrastructure, whatever you want to call it. Once you plant that seed, I think you can start the creative juices flowing. And I think we really enjoyed doing this design project because you could see how proud the students were of their design by the end of semester when they had to present it in a poster exhibition. And finally, I guess the third point, again, very, very similar, really relates to the actual knowledge, the technical knowledge. You need that breadth. You need to show the interdisciplinarity of the practice, but in a way tailor it to what the students or the audience is good at. So in a way, slightly differently expressed, but I'm so glad we align on these points. And I hope that we can somehow recycle the course in future. We have to look into some opportunities because I'd love to have many other students experience the wonders of this course.
Yeah, and I think it brought together also the environmental engineers with students from this
It was a building systems,
integrative building systems or something. We had the second year quite a few students from there, which was really interesting because they came in with different expertise. And so, having these students from different academic kind of directions coming together and working together was also really a good experience, I think. And then it highlighted this need for interdisciplinarity that you mentioned.
Definitely. So looking forward to seeing what we can make out of this in future. But for those interested, we'll definitely put some tips in the show notes so that you can also have a think about your own course in the future. So nature-based solutions and blue-green infrastructures is the one aspect. Then we have NEWAL, so the Network for Water and Life. Tell me a bit about NEWAL.
Yeah, so NEWAL was actually a follow-up to an earlier project that was really, so this was my kind of first going back to Africa for work. It was a project also supported by SUDAC, by Swiss universities, and it was called Science Action in Schools and for Development, or SAS4SD, Science Action in Schools for Sustainable Development.
Acronyms.
Yeah, SAS4SD is enough to know. But the really cool thing about that was that I knew someone who was setting up a network. It's called TAMO, a network of weather stations across Africa, trying to collect weather data because there's a lack in weather data for Africa, for the continent of Africa. So the idea of TAMO was to set up weather stations like every 30 kilometers and use that data then to advise like for farming, for insurance for farmers and so on. And I think it wasn't able to grow as much as it was hoped, but through this TAMO project, we got to install in Cameroon a couple stations, weather stations. So the idea is to put these weather stations in secondary schools and then work with the teachers there to encourage them to include, so they have access to the data from the weather stations. And so then include in their teaching, raising awareness about how weather might be changing or even just collecting the data so the students see how much did it rain or, like they could look at plots of the rainfall and understand and then compare, maybe at different weather stations in the country, like see, we got so much rain, but up there in that weather stations, they didn't get any, and understand a bit then the variability of rainfall like in their countries.
I remember as a kid, I had absolute joy in measuring weather. We had a school project, I think it was back in second grade or something, and we set up a mini weather station, nothing fancy, but you remember these rain gauges where you had this tube with millimeter markers, and we had to go out there every day and measure it as a class group, and I remembered enjoying that as a kid. So certainly something I can see a lot of people jumping onto.
Exactly. I mean, so that was the thing. So this project was then to kind of use these weather stations in the schools and then to encourage or come up with teaching material that the teachers could use, right? And so one of them, the teaching material, for example, was have them create their own thing to collect rain and then compare with what the weather station measured. So exactly like you're saying, I mean, again, this is back to my, love for applied learning, right? Yeah. So this was trying to teach the students in an applied way about climate change and beyond. And so that was the first project. So this was Science Action in School. So we were trying to incorporate learning about weather and the weather station and data and climate change and looking a bit at their livelihoods to understand impacts.
And just to clarify again, and this was for schools around Ghana, I believe, or was it other West African countries as well?
Yeah, the project was in Ghana and Cameroon.
Okay,
and so in the end, we ended up continuing to do more with schools in Ghana because there were many more stations that had been installed. So, there's at least 60 stations, if not more, around Ghana.
Yep.
And so many teachers. And so we organized workshops for the teachers. And, teaching material was developed actually by a student at the university here as her master's project. She went out to Ghana and visited the schools and then developed, also analyzed the data, but then developed some teaching material that's on our website now for, teaching about these topics. So that, then you asked about NEWAL, right?
Yeah.
So SAS4SD was phase 1 kind of, and then NEWAL was phase 2, where we then joined forces with other universities in Switzerland or beyond for West Africa. And this is where then we developed this network for water and life in West Africa. And our main activity was this winter school, what we called a winter school because it was, in February, but it was not winter in Africa. But we went there then in February and we took students from Swiss universities, and they joined students from West Africa. So it was not just Ghana, but we had from Liberia and Ivory Coast as well, and Cameroon, and 1 year Benin, I think. We've done 2 of those schools so far.
So really a whole network.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's bringing them together. And then the idea that was in Ghana, looking at the challenges that Ghana is facing with respect to water, and then having them work in teams. We did field excursions so they could see water treatment, which to me was really actually very interesting because their water treatment is actually so sophisticated because the water is so polluted. So it's not wastewater treatment, but it's actually just water treatment to get it to a good
drinking level
standard that they can then provide it to the people living in the cities. So already, there's a lot of sediment also in water there in some of these rivers. But the water treatment plant we visited, and we visited rice farmers and so on. And so the students also got to see in the field kind of what the challenges were. It was a great networking chance and learning chance for our students to be working in groups with the West African students and trying to address some of these challenges, think about solutions. Water and mining was a big topic as well in Ghana. And so, it was really a very good experience, interesting, learned a lot, and it had follow-up activities as well. We did one in 2020 and then one in 2022. There will be another one in 2024, but I'm no longer working with the project, so I'm not involved.
Yeah.
But just as a side note, one of our students who went in 2022, I believe it was, she returned to do her master thesis there in Ghana, in Kumasi, looking at wastewater treatment, that was. And the graduation ceremony was just yesterday, and she got awarded like an excellence
That's lovely.
award for her thesis. So it was really exciting to see that, how such an opportunity could lead to her. Of course, she was a great student as well, but the fact that, this NEWAL, through the NEWAL, she got an opportunity to go to Africa to do research that she was interested in, and she produced an amazing thesis out of it.
So if you're listening to this, congratulations on this. And it's lovely to see how this program has been able to help you and also is helping many other students in both directions to foster this global north-south knowledge exchange. And I guess in a way to learn from potential pitfalls that maybe Switzerland has faced with water challenges, and then also vice versa, tailor solutions and improve upon current practices as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so you've had these trips where students from Switzerland go and visit West Africa, but I think you've also had the flip side as well, where students from West Africa have been able to visit Switzerland.
Yes, the first time we organized the winter school was in 2020, and we had planned that they would come in September. The Ghanaian students would come here, but unfortunately COVID hit, so that changed everything. But then following up to the 2022 winter school, we had students come. They came last September from West Africa, and we did a study tour. So they traveled around and visited many wastewater treatment plant and other places to see kind of how things are done here. And it was really a very exciting time for them as well. And I think, kind of a rewarding time too, because of their dedication and their hard work in this winter school in Ghana. Then they were able to come here and be exposed and have this trip here. And it also really fosters this community, right? They are all connected now. And, when the West African students came here, they reconnected with the Swiss students who'd gone to Ghana. So I think these are professionals that will keep in touch, and they'll have this connection. So that's also just kind of widening our networks and learning from each other and being exposed to different cultures, I think for young people, it's such a great experience.
And it's incredibly important. I think we need to foster that open-mindedness and for people to see different cultures and just be exposed to different ways of doing things, because that in the end breeds creativity, it breeds solutions that can have global impact and global reach.
Yeah, and I think, what I've found also through the courses, this Water Resources Seminars course that I offer, there's really a lot of interest in Swiss students in making a difference, in doing something with their careers to help alleviate challenges, for others. And so this chance to go to Africa for the winter school was maybe a first step for them to actually go and experience and see, because it's so different from watching videos online, and then really connect with the people and get this love for the culture and how the people are there. I think also just comparing cultures here and there. In Ghana, they're so open and they have fun and they dance and they laugh. And so just for our Swiss students to be exposed to that and to see how different cultures are. And despite the fact that things are very difficult for many people in Africa, in these countries, they still have this joie de vivre, or this, they're resilient and they have communities and they connect with each other. And I think that's something that we could learn from, actually, in the West.
No, indeed. I see the value in community as well, and really that open-mindedness and learning from other cultures as well, because of that joie de vivre, as you mentioned. And the third topic I'd like to get into is something you're also very proud of, that you've really set up, and it's amazing to see what you've achieved. And that is 500 Women Scientists Zurich, supporting women in science, technology, engineering, and math. As far as I understand, it's a USA-based organization, and there are different chapters, but currently more than 20,000 women have been given a chance to really embark on careers in STEM within this program. And over 100 countries have pledged to build this inclusivity in this environment. So you were a founder and coordinator of the local chapter in Zurich. Tell me the story about that.
Yeah, so 500 Women Scientists, Zurich chapter, indeed, I founded it, I believe, around 2018. And my interest in this is because, it's an organization that aims to bring together women scientists and engineers and just raise more awareness or make them more visible, right? Because often when media is looking for an expert or so, they often may choose just a male, right? Because the male is more visible, more prominent. And so part of this effort of the 500 Women Scientists was also just to make more women scientists and engineers visible in a wider sense, right? So my passion for this is because, I studied physics and engineering, right? And fortunately, I never had any resistance to this. My parents saw that I liked what I was doing and I could do what I did, and it was never questioned. Why are you, going this direction? That's not appropriate, right? Which does often still sadly happen for young girls. And so for me, there was never, it's just I was doing what I like to do. And okay, if I was one of two female in the physics class, so what? I just, that was me. I was doing what I like to do. And so, but then coming, I think, to Switzerland here and realizing that it's not, I guess, being just made more aware that it's not always the case. And also then with my children, my oldest child is a daughter, and seeing her in the school system here where there was not... Yet somehow when she was in high school, it seemed like most of her friends were thinking, oh, math is too difficult. We want to study languages. We're going the language direction. When she was trying to pick which focus she would do in high school. And that to me was really sad, because I thought you shouldn't have to make a choice, right? You should be able to study math if you like math. And so that's why I just felt like, I'd like to do something. Also being at ETH, there are not a lot of women in certain topics. Of course, some environmental engineering, we're fortunate. It's about 50%.
Yeah, but there's stereotypes in other disciplines as well, which I do notice. And I sometimes find it's weird because, irrespective of race or gender, everyone has that creative side and can contribute to that field. And we need that, because that's, in a way, what also creates innovation.
And I think if you're good at something, then you should just be able to go for it, not suffer from what society or your peers think, or your teacher. Sadly, here and maybe in elementary school, the teachers do not encourage enough STEM topics, some of them. It really depends on the teacher, and they're mostly female teachers in primary school. So I just thought it would be good, and also kind of bring together the female students, PhDs, postdocs here, and to just connect them at least, to see that they're not the only ones, right? And that's kind of how the idea came about for this 500 Women Scientists chapter. And then the big first activity came from this recognition that actually, that in high school here in Switzerland, there are far fewer women in the math profile, math, physics profile, science than in the languages or other profiles. And so, of course, this impacts how many students come to ETH, female students, to study here at ETH. So together with Maike Akfeld from the math department here, we came up with this idea. She is the president now of the Kangaroo math competition.
Okay.
And so she was the Swiss president. Now she's the international president. And this is a math competition that's offered around the world. It originated in Australia.
That's why it's called Kangaroo.
Exactly. Yeah. So it originated there. But every March, it's a math competition. It's problem solving. So it's basically your natural talent in solving mathematical problems is tested. And so it's every March, starting from primary school up through high school, I think even university level. So my kids always participated in this in Switzerland, in their school, so I was aware of the Kangaroo competition. It's not in all schools here. It depends on the school. And then Maike said that it was realized that because she has access to the performances, right, and students get a certificate for how many points they got right. And up through elementary school, girls and boys performed pretty equally. It was, pretty much the same. But at a certain point, like around 14 or so, when they start the secondary school and then have to choose a profile, that changed, that not as many girls were in the top percentages.
No, really? I remember back in my school, I think I was, struggling to keep up, but there were a lot of girls who were way better at math than I was.
But what age was that?
That was in like 10th grade.
10th grade?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
But that's the thing here is that the Kangaroo test, it becomes also optional.
Okay.
And so earlier on, it's everybody takes it, and then it becomes optional, and then actually you maybe should study a bit to be able to do well. And there is, in the GIMI, this is the Swiss system.
And GIMI is the higher...
secondary school.
Secondary,
Yeah, it's like basically secondary school and high school.
Yeah, because I know in the German system, after 5th or 4th grade, you go into a gymnasium or GIMI as they call it.
Yeah.
And then there's a few other levels of schooling where you either finish at the 13th year or the 10th year or even earlier than that. So so many girls are in GIMI and doing well, but somehow they realized that as teen years and later that it wasn't the same 50-50 anymore. So Maike recognized that, and from the results that she'd seen year after year, and so we decided to invite these girls before they make a decision about kind of what they want to focus on in high school, invite them to ETH, expose them to the wonderful world of STEM or MINT as it's called in German, because it's Mathematik and so on, but it's STEM in English. And so what we do is we take the top 100 girls from the competition, the top 100 performing girls, and invite those 100 girls from throughout the German-speaking Switzerland and invite them to ETH for a day and organize a program for them. They get to visit labs. And what's really interesting is that, we decided to invite parents too, because some girls, they may be 12, 13, and they may have to travel over an hour to get here. So we said, well, let's say the parents can come too. Would be a nice experience for the family.
Yeah, no, and the thing that's really been an added benefit that we didn't recognize is that so many parents come and they spend the morning. We have a program for everyone together in the morning. But, we've gotten feedback from the parents, thank you so much for this experience. Our daughter, it was really interesting for our daughter. But others saying, we had no idea our daughter is good at math. So it's like, but it's this kind of thing where the girls are not told that actually they did really well. They're just told, this is your results, good job. But, they're not encouraged from that, right? Like it's just like a fact, okay, good job, finished. But
bringing in the family unit, both generations, parents and the girls, it really helps foster that dialogue then between them as well about their future and where they might want to go, and creates that support structure that the parents can give to their daughters.
And it's an opportunity for parents to ask questions, because still in Switzerland, it's only about 20% of the students that go to university, right, to ETH, to a technical university or one of the universities. It's a small percentage. Many do the apprenticeships and go later maybe to applied universities. So for the parents, it can be a shift in their mindset as well, where they think, oh, actually, maybe this could be a route our child, our daughter could take. And so it's been really good in that way, yes, opening up and then giving the parents an opportunity to encourage their children, right? Because I think, I saw that with my daughter as well, just encouraging that, hey, you can do it, Don't listen to what your friends say or tell you should do this or that, You think about it yourself, what you like to do. And she ended up choosing my oldest daughter, the physics math profile, and now she's just started a PhD in physics, where I think maybe if she'd had different parents, different environment, she would be doing something else. Yeah. Of course, maybe she'd be very happy there, but I'm really happy, doing something different. I'm not saying that this is the only thing for her, but I think that it's really important. This goes back again to my 500 Women Scientists activities, say we need more women, or we need, a balance, right? That it's going both ways, right? That professions are not identified as being from
a
one
certain gender.
Exactly.
No, everyone can be what they want. The world is your oyster, essentially. But you want to make sure that people are empowered to know that.
Exactly.
That they have the choice.
Exactly.
And that empowerment seen in the Kangaroo Goes Science program is also done through other activities in this program, including mentorship activities that you run, as well as support groups for moms as well.
Right. From our members, we tried to identify where could we support you. So we did a series of events where we just brought in 4 PhD candidates, and we brought in postdocs to tell about where they got to where they are and maybe give some tips and make this connection, right? This network is so important. So actually this networking, connecting with other women who can connect you then with others, I think that's a big part of the 500 Women Scientists as well. And then we did, something for postdocs, which was bringing in some of these young professors to explain what did they do, how did they get there, which grants did they apply for and which steps did they follow. And some of them said it was really great to go abroad, to go somewhere else for a postdoc for a bit and then come back to get this experience. So just sharing experiences and successes, tips. So that was really very helpful, I think, for our members. And we also did something for then, don't remember exactly the title, but Mother or Professor and Mother, Yes, You Can.
Okay.
I'd have to look again, but it was a catchy title, and the point was, if you want to be a professor and have a family, you can do that. And so we invited several professor moms, and they shared their stories. So, again, it's just to show that you'll always find examples of people out there who've gone a different route, and you can use them as inspiration, and you can go that way if that's the way you want to go. So that's where we got in with this also families, because, this is something I went through myself, right? I wanted a family, but I wanted a profession.
Yep.
I had to make some sacrifices, but I'm in a great place.
It's still doable, yeah.
Exactly. I don't regret anything. I'm not a professor, but I'm very happy where I'm at. And so I think this also just because now in academia at the university, many of the young women, if they're in a master's, PhD, postdoc space or position, they're trying to decide, okay, do I want to have a family? If I have a child, how will this impact my career? And so we just try with an organization to connect people together to help them realize it's possible. Maybe these are some tricks you can do. And so that's also where this Mothers in Academia network came about. But unfortunately, it wasn't as successful as we'd hoped. The person running it, she moved back to the U.S.
Oh, okay.
But the reason for it not being as successful is because when you're studying and have children, you don't have time to get together and discuss things, right? So, they tried to organize networking opportunities, but working moms are just so busy that didn't work out. But at least, on Slack, we had a space where they could share tips.
Exactly. Yeah. You built up momentum in some form, and that will keep carrying on. And I must say, on some of the previous guests we've had are also professor moms, and they tell some funny stories. I remember episode 22, Françoise Bichat, how she took her child to a conference. It wasn't exactly the best idea, but she does remember it fondly. And it really, these are small anecdotes and examples that show that it is possible to make a change in the world, to lead these careers and have a beautiful family at the same time.
Yeah, and it also, in other places, there are so many more women working, and kids are accepted in the workplace, right? It's not like you're looked down upon, if
No,
you have to
certainly
bring them
not.
by or something. So I think it's just a change of mentality that's still needed. And hopefully, eventually we'll get there. But yeah, you don't see little kids around. You don't see changing tables in bathrooms. I mean, someone was telling me how heartbreaking it was for her to see, she was a PhD student, to see a PhD colleague changing the baby on the floor at the university because there are no changing tables, So some of these really simple needs that could make lives of mom, students, or professionals easier are not yet there, because someone needs to make the decision to do it. And
And you are a fine example of someone who's doing so much for it. It's incredibly inspiring to listen to, and also just how many ideas exist. And I hope through this episode and this talk as well, many can take these ideas and also implement them across the world as well. So
yeah, maybe, just to add, since I started this 500 Women Scientists in 2018, it's been really encouraging to see how many women groups there are now, for example, at ETH. So in a way, we have less to do now because, there's many different women groups now at ETH through the departments that are doing a lot, and also mentoring and so on. So I think that, in the last years, we've really come a long way. And I think that students now know where they can, female students, where they can find other women and get mentors who are maybe a few years older than them or a few years
down
further
the career
along.
Path,
Yeah. To me, that's very encouraging. Of course, there's always more to be done.
Yep.
But I think that it has changed in the past years. And
in a positive way.
In a positive way in terms of activities, connections, visibility to events where women are invited, also from startups, organizations. And we also did an event that showcased women who have their own startups, which was really interesting too. But other organizations are organizing events that are aimed at women to make more connections or to hear these stories of others. So that's encouraging.
Yeah.
In terms of the numbers, I don't know if we'll ever get to 50% like in the math department or in the physics department or mechanical engineering. I think we have a long way to go for that. But I think that it is becoming more commonplace, right?
Yeah.
That women are going into STEM topics.
And as my guest from episode 9, Anna Deletic, describes it, it's a pendulum. It will swing in both directions and eventually stabilize to something that is sustainable, something that we can be proud of. So looking forward to seeing where this program heads, and we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that people can then read more about the program and find out how to get involved as well. You've been at the ETH for a long time. Now you're at the Leopold-Bachmann Foundation. What's next for you on your journey?
Yeah, it's a very exciting place to be, I have to say. Because my boss here at ETH is retiring, I had to look for another job. The MAS program is closing. So after much searching and interviews and so on here and there, I landed at the Leopold-Bachmann Foundation, and I'm a senior program manager responsible for education and vocational training programs. And our projects are in Africa, in Southern Africa, in Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So it's connecting my passion for education, my passion for making opportunities for young people, which would be the vocational training, and my passion for, development-related work or Global South, trying to do good for people, give opportunities to people who may not otherwise have those opportunities. So I'm very excited working there and developing, trying to understand what programs we support, how we could better support projects and be sure that somehow, the scholarships we're giving to young people actually are helping them to make a better life for themselves. So I'm excited to be there. Maybe in a couple of years, we can have another podcast about my work there.
Definitely. And I would love to follow up and see what's happened since then. So looking forward to some exciting projects that you'll be involved in. But Darcy, this has been an incredible discussion around the many things you've been doing to really bridge cultural experiences, diversity, global North and South exchanges in the spaces of sustainability, water, nature. And like I do with every guest, I'd love to ask you a few questions so that listeners can get to know even more about you. And you've already told us a lot about what inspires you, even just in that discussion about where you're heading to. And you've also mentioned about how Cairo has been a big impact. The Sanaga River has been a big moment as well in your life. But what other key moment, book, person, or event really had a huge change in your career or mindset?
No, that's a difficult one. No, I mean, I guess my philosophy in life has always been, I guess, also growing up in Africa where things often go wrong and you just have to keep going. And there's a word there that they use very much. It's called dabare, where I was growing up. It means it's like tinkering. You find a way to make things work.
Okay.
Your car breaks down. You find a way to, fix whatever needs to be fixed so you can keep going.
Dabare.
Dabare. Yeah, like it's you finding a way to keep going, right?
Awesome.
A unique, innovative, you have to keep going. So in Africa, there are many challenges, growing up just thinking of, driving on dirt roads, mud roads, getting stuck and so on. So I think my experience growing up there, maybe it's just made me more resilient in terms of realizing you're always going to get knocks. There's always going to be something to happen, but, you absorb it and you find a way to move forward. That you absorb it as an experience that you learn from, and next time you can do better. And so I think this philosophy in life has really helped me because it's kept me optimistic, right? Because, grants don't get funded. You don't get that job you're looking for. We're always getting knocks in life. But the truth is, there's always another window somewhere else. So I've kept this positivity and, realizing that, okay, if something doesn't work or if something breaks down, you find a way to fix it and to move forward and and there's another solution somehow in another better way. And for me, looking back on my life, I can see how kind of it's a patchwork that all fits together, right? And I think for many of us, it's like that, you go through these valleys, these difficult times, but you have to think, hey, this is just part of making me a stronger person.
And so, dabare.
Dabare, yes.
Tinker. You'll find a way through it.
Find a way through. You have to find a way through it. Don't just give up.
It's never a straight line. It's always an interesting journey. But when you look back at it, it's fascinating, that patchwork as you described. It's a beautiful visual, actually.
Yeah.
Because that's in a way how our lives look like. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing overnight, what would you change and why?
I think that there's so much good in the world and we just search for the good and get rid of the bad. I guess that's what I would want my wand to do.
And keep harnessing the good.
Keep harnessing the good and get rid of the bad.
Yeah.
And try to make the world a better place so that we're not seeing all this heartache and hardship and loss, but that we actually see the joyful things that are happening in the world. Yeah. That's what I would like to see. But sadly, we just have to keep working on the little patches where we are and spreading good where we are. And that's all we can do. And so that's what I'll keep doing.
And make doing this an addictive activity so everyone else wants to get on board.
Exactly. We just kind of keep spreading the ripples of, connectivity between people.
I'm with you on that. And so I guess on that same level of challenges, we learn from our challenges that we go through. It makes us more resilient. You have become very resilient. And if you can reflect, what was one of the most challenging situations you've ever faced in your career to date and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think, challenging. I've been fortunate, or maybe it's just how I view things, right? That some people maybe took it as very challenging. But just back to what we discussed, the first one with my choice to, go to this university and study languages in Vermont and do development work and think that was my future and suddenly have it all come crashing down on me. That was tough. I was alone. My parents were in Africa. I didn't, I felt kind of out of place in the U.S. at that time because I'd lived my whole life in Africa. But then just kind of refocusing and this back to this dabare, finding a way. Okay, we're going to make this work, right? And so I went for the physics. And the same when I first went to Colorado State University to study engineering, I was under the impression that I would get a scholarship. I don't know. I talked to a professor and it seemed like that I would have the funding. And I arrived there and he said, no, it's not. And he was also in a different kind of, he was in environmental engineering with wastewater. And that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do water resources more. But anyway, suddenly I was there. I wanted to do this master's program. I had no money and I didn't know how to go on. And again, my parents were in Africa and I was alone. I didn't know anybody there. I just moved there. And that was really tough and thinking, okay, now what? I've just come back from Egypt. What do I do? But I just took some time to reflect. Thankfully, I could call my parents and talk to them. No WhatsApp then, no,
that's true.
No Zoom, no nothing. I had to pay for an expensive call to Africa. But, they said, listen, we're going to help you out, take a loan and we'll help you pay the loan off. So thanks to their support, they made it possible. So I took a loan, I worked some, and I made it work for me. So I think that I've been fortunate. I've been fortunate that I've always had the backing of my parents and them helping me to make my dreams come true also, to a certain point, of course, right? Okay. Which is a bit like it's with my kids now too, We say, listen, we believe in education. Education's important. We're going to help you get your master's at least. We think that's important. And then you can move on. So I think I've been really lucky that I've had the support. And I guess a message from that is also just that we all have support around us, that we shouldn't be shy to ask. So I think like if you're stuck, talk to people and find a way forward. We are a community. There are people around who will help you out. Yeah.
Never forget, you're not alone.
And sometimes it's just a little help that you need, but that makes all the difference to give you the hope for continuing.
And it's a message I think everyone needs to hear and remember, because in tough times, I think knowing this gives us a lot of support. I certainly have seen the power of that when I went through dark times. So yeah, you're not alone. You're never alone. We are a community. And so for this community, what tips and strategies can you offer in terms of time management? How do you maintain a balance between a lot of these beautiful things you're doing, as well as your own personal time and family time?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't watch TV much. I love to read. And so I grew up without a TV. I grew up without a phone and all this social media. And so I guess in a way, I'm very fortunate that I'm not distracted by all these things.
Okay.
So I spend my time being productive. I like to be active and productive. And I guess I make these activities, like with 500 women scientists, I make it fun for myself too, right? I mean, if you're getting something out of it, it's no longer really a task or a chore.
True.
And so it's actually, just part of what you're doing. And so, I think in terms of time management, I think you do need to prioritize and take time for yourself. I guess that's why I don't watch movies. I just prefer to read a book or go for a walk or spend time in the mountains. So that's how, time for yourself is very important, time to reflect. Yeah, so I think, in terms of time management, then you also have to choose what you're going to focus on. You can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
And so choose and learn to say no. I think some people who like to be active, they have a hard time saying no. So learn to say no. And I'm very kind of goal-oriented. So often I try to, if I'm doing something, I kind of set a timeline. And so, okay, this is how it's going to be accomplished, right?
Yep.
And I want it done by this time. So then I just work on kind of ticking off these goals that I have rather than just running all over the place and not knowing when this done or that done. But it gives me great satisfaction to be able to tick off, these things, whether it's an event that's organized or a proposal that's submitted or anything that, just kind of have this concept of how to complete this task. How you're going to complete it, what milestones you need to do so that you can celebrate once it's completed. And I think that's also like we need to celebrate things, right?
True.
This is also
small wins.
Yeah.
And continuously.
And recognize, if it's just like a meal out to celebrate something, it makes you, to me, I enjoy just these simple things that are a bit out of the ordinary, whatever it may be in your daily life, but just kind of to bring in this celebratory uplifting moment, which can be very simple. It can be also just having a coffee with a friend, right? Reconnecting with a friend. So
the joie de vivre, as we've also mentioned previously.
Exactly. To find ways to incorporate that into your life so you just don't get bogged down in just feeling like responsible and continually running after deadlines. I think you have to take the time out either for yourself or to do something that makes you happy.
Indeed. No, very good advice. And what other advice can you offer to young scientists starting out?
Yeah, I think keep a positive attitude, I think, and recognize that just because something doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. There's always something new around the corner. So just keep that mentality and recognize that whatever you do, it's making you a better person or a better professional. So even if it's a failure at something, it is making you that unique individual with these experiences that make you a better professional and a better person. So I think I would say just keep optimistic and just keep looking forward also. Don't look back, look forward to what's out there, what's ahead of you.
True. And I guess dabare.
Exactly.
Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, I'd suggest that the easiest way is through LinkedIn. Just look me up there and I'm there.
And we'll put that and I guess some links to your profile pages for where you are, as well as links to all the things we've discussed today and opportunities for people to get involved in the various programs in the show notes. But Darcy, it's been an incredible time. talking to you, reflecting on our own journey as well as a lot of the amazing things you've been doing. And I look forward to having you on again at some point for part 2, once you've launched a few more incredible programs as well. But like I do with every guest on the show, I always give my guests the final words. So one last message for the listeners to take away from today.
I tend to talk too much. So one last message. You have to listen to the podcast and get all the little tips there. No, I guess one last message is just, think of the world as a community, and there are people all around you, and reach out when you need help and talk to people to get advice, listen to people. And I think just it's important, my advice is really just to connect with others, because that's how you are going to have a fulfilling life, is by connecting with others, considering others, doing things for others. That makes us happy too. So I guess that's my advice just on a general level. Yes. If you want further advice as a student or woman scientist or so on, I guess you can just contact me through LinkedIn.
Thank you very much. And that wraps up our broad, fascinating and heartwarming episode with Darcy Molnar. For more information on West African culture, teaching notes for your own nature-based solutions course, or a range of links and programs to better support women in science, check out the show notes for more information over at petermbach.com/podcast. And as always, thank you listeners for tuning in to this episode and for your feedback and support. If you're enjoying this show, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this podcast with your family, friends, colleagues, and even fellow cross-cultural collaborators. Please also do subscribe or follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you are listening from to be notified of the latest release as soon as it becomes available. If you're curious about me or my work in general, you can also check out my website or social media. Head to petermbach.com, my YouTube channel, Peter Marcus Bach, that's Marcus with a C, or follow me on X, formerly Twitter, @PeterMBach, or Instagram @PeterMBach87. Feel free to reach out to me with any feedback or guest suggestions so that I can keep improving this show. The podcast's intro and outro song is called Starsky by Alex Kieran. Stay tuned for our next episode and next guest to hear how they are tackling the grand challenges.